وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. As we mentioned yesterday in the opening introductory lecture or reminder regarding the importance of sincerity, regarding the importance of focusing on your worship, having your heart in your worship. Carrying on from that point, we'll mention today a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which will aid you again in desiring to be focused in your worship, to be worshipping sincerely for the sake of Allah. And that is the hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, أقرب ما يكون العبد من ربه وهو ساجد. The closest a servant can be to his Lord is when he is in prostration, sujood. The closest a servant can be to his Lord is when he is in prostration. There are several reasons behind this, or several points of benefit behind this. One of them is, as the scholars they have mentioned, the likes of Shaykh al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah and others, they said when you go down into sujood, you go down into prostration, you take the most honorable part of your body. And what is the most honorable, dignified part of your body? Your face. You take the most respected, the most dignified, the most honorable part of your body, and you put it down into the ground. The place where everybody's feet is treading upon. The place where everybody's feet has been walking along, treading along. You put the most honorable part of your body down into that. Why? Why would you do that? Put the most honorable part of your body down into the ground where the feet of the people are, as submission to your Lord. That is submission to your Creator. You are submitting yourself as a slave before your Lord. So that shows the great degree of sincerity a person who does that with that intent of pleasing his Lord. Shows the poverty we are in as a creation before our Lord, the mighty and majestic. That even somebody who may be 7 foot tall, somebody may be 7 foot tall, and he is standing up. You are right down with your head in the ground, yet you are closer to your Lord than the man who is 7 foot tall standing up high. You are closer to your Lord down there in the ground, because you are the one in that position who has lowered himself, submitted himself to his Creator. And that shows your modesty, shows your humility, shows your submission to Allah. And that is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, the closest a slave will be to his Lord is when you are down in that prostration. And that's why when a person is in prostration, you should take that opportunity to make dua. Of course, you recite what you are supposed to recite, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, and even that has a great wisdom and benefit in it. What do you read when you're in prostration? Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. What does that mean? Glory be to Allah the Most High. That may Allah be free of any deficiency, the Most High. Look at the words that have been legislated upon you to recite when you're down there in the ground in prostration. You are the lowest you could be with your body. When you're right down there in prostration, rolled up on the floor, you have taken your body to the lowest place you could go. Right down there. But what is the dua that you read when you are right down there in the ground? That your Lord is the most high. Look at the difference. You as a servant make yourself the most low, but then you say when you're down there, my Lord is the most high. Showing that submission to Allah. That is ubudiyyah. That is the worship and sincerity of worship to your Lord. You take yourself down knowing how much of a low creation you are. And then when you're down there, you praise Allah, but my Lord is the most high. Above all of the creation, separate from this creation. Not like the Sufis, they say that Allah is mixed in with all of this creation. No. Allah is above and separate from all of this creation. It is mentioned in the hadith, there are the 7 heavens. One heaven to the next heaven is the distance of how much? 500 years. One heaven to the next heaven. From that heaven to the next heaven, another 500 years. From that heaven to the next one, another 500 years. Look at how the gaps are. Then on top of the 7th heaven is the arsh, the kursi, the footstool of Allah, and the water, and then the arsh, the throne of Allah, which is the greatest of all of the creation, the ceiling of all of this creation. When you imagine the size of this throne of Allah, it shows you how small and weak a creation you are in need of your Creator. The example of the throne of Allah compared to the kursi, the footstool, is like the example of a ring thrown into a desert. How big is the desert? Some of them are bigger than the island of Barbados. Huge deserts, miles and miles of desert, nothing else, just desert. You throw one ring into that desert. How big is that ring compared to this desert? Imagine throwing a ring anywhere in Barbados. He said, go find it. One ring. What is the size of that ring compared to the island of Barbados? Nothing. Tiny. That is the example of the footstool of Allah compared to the throne of Allah. But then what is the example of the footstool of Allah compared to all of this creation? The same again. This time though, the footstool of Allah compared to all of this creation. The footstool is like a desert, and all of this creation is a ring thrown into that desert. Imagine the relative amount. The relative amount. All of this creation compared to the footstool of Allah is like a ring in a vast desert. How big is the footstool of Allah compared to this? But then the footstool itself is tiny compared to the throne. If you were going to compare this creation to the throne, it wouldn't just be a ring in a desert, it would be a speck of dust even smaller than that. So you see the greatness of the creation of Allah. But then it says, there are going to be 8 angels, and some of the scholars say more, carrying the throne of Allah on that day. And if the throne of Allah is that big, that huge a creation that Allah has created, then above all of that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what therefore of your Creator Allah? Of course we do not imagine, and we do not try to imagine. But what we can know is that if the throne of Allah is so big, then surely the Creator Allah is the mighty and majestic, far greater than anything in His creation. Far greater than anything in His creation compared to. When a person is in prostration, particularly in the month of Ramadan, you're in prostration in the Taraweeh, making lots of prostration. And remember in that prostration, this moment, you have lowered your honorable part down into the ground as submission to Allah. And this is the closest you are to Allah in that position. And it is an opportunity to make dua, to recite Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, but then to make your own dua too. Make your dua for what you want Allah to answer your dua upon. The righteous and the good dua, of course. The evil and the haram dua, no. But the righteous and good dua that you want, then make it. Whatever that affair may be, Allah says in the Quran, call upon me. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. My servants, they ask you about me, tell them I am close. I answer the dua of the one who calls upon me. In the other narration, which is mutawatir, narrated by multiple companions, that in the last third of the night, ينزل ربك إذا بقي ثلث الليل الأخير. Your Lord descends to the lowest heaven when there is a third of the night remaining. And He says, مَنْ يَسْتَغْفِرُنِي فَأَغْفِرَ لَهُ. Who is seeking my forgiveness and I will forgive them. مَنْ يَسْأَلُنِي فَأَعْطِيَهُ. Who is asking me for anything and I will give it to him. Who is making tawbah and I will give it to him. This is in the hadith. Allah descends in the last third of the night and He says, who is asking my forgiveness, I'll give it. Who is asking any dua, I'll give it. That's why the last third of the night is a virtuous time. A virtuous time for a person to pray, to make dua, to read the Quran, to worship. It is a virtuous time, that a time Allah descends to the lowest heaven, to the earth. So the prostration is a great act of worship. And it is a time to make your own dua. Even if you cannot make it in Arabic, you have not memorized the du'as in Arabic, and you have something particular you want to ask about, then you can make it in English, as the scholars say. You are in need and necessity and you cannot do it in Arabic, then it's allowed to make your dua in English at that moment. This is an opportunity not to waste. Not to make these worships, as we said yesterday, robotic. Don't be like a robot with your body only. A robot going up and down in prostration, not even thinking about these things. Not even thinking you are the closest to Allah you can be. Not even thinking what an opportunity this is to make dua. Not thinking how you have lowered yourself in submission to your Lord, just going down and coming up no thought. That is not the way of the servant. That is not the way of the Sunni Salafi. You want to be upon the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you must be aware of the religion, you must have the knowledge. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man salaka tariqan yaltamisu fihi ilma, sahhala Allahu lahu bihi tariqan ila al-jannah." Whomsoever treads upon a pathway by knowledge, Allah will make your pathway to paradise because of it. For the one who learns about this knowledge, learns about his worship and sincerity. So take that point of benefit for tonight, regarding your worship and in particular regarding your prostration. Your worship as a whole, you know in the hadith of Jibreel, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the level of ihsan, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. Worship Allah as if you can see Him. But at least know, when you're worshipping, Allah sees you. Allah sees you and knows how you are doing your worship. So do it with the mind in focus. In prostration, do it with your mind in focus. Call upon Allah and make that dua with strength, with firmness, with meaning not firmness but resoluteness, with resoluteness, that you really want Allah to answer your dua. That's the sunnah, how to do it. When you make dua, that you really want the dua to be answered. You have it in your heart, you really want this dua. And you're asking Allah with all of your heart. That's the way to do it. That's what it says in the hadith, in the sunnah. Don't make your dua half-heartedly. Now this phrase, half-heartedly. That only half of your heart is in the dua. You're not convinced, oh Allah, maybe give me this, maybe. That is not the way to do the dua. You want something good for yourself, you want something righteousness, you want to become a better person, you want to become a better Muslim, then you make dua to Allah with that strength in the dua. Allah, give me the strength to be a good mu'min, to be a believer, a practicing Muslim, to be upon your worship with strength, make a dua. There is a hadith saying that. Ta'azimu ad-dua, meaning be upon that resoluteness when you make the dua. And Allah will answer your dua. Allah answers the dua of the one who calls upon Him. Even if a person has sinned, you have done wrong, make dua to Allah to forgive you for what has gone by in your life, and that you rectify yourself for the future. Allah mentioned in the Quran, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Say to my servants who have done wrong to themselves, meaning they have sinned, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. Allah forgives all of the sins. Make dua to Him sincerely. In the hadith also it mentions the hadith Qudsi, إِنَّكُمْ تُخْطِئُونَ بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَأَنَا أَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا فَاسْتَغْفِرُونِي أَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ. All of you do sin. Day and night you do sin. Allah says in the hadith, all of you do sin day and night. But I am the one who forgives the sins. So call upon me, ask for forgiveness, and I'll forgive. For the one who sincerely asks for forgiveness. Also in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ خَطَّاء وَخَيْرُ الْخَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. All of the sons of Adam make error. You have made error in your lives. You have done wrong in your lives. The hadith in the Sunnah mentions it. All of us we do wrong. But then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَخَيْرُ الْخَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. But the best of those who have made error, and we all made error, but the best of us then is the one who sincerely repents from that error. Sincerely with a full heart makes dua to Allah, that Allah strengthens you and puts you upon the right path. To be a servant of Allah upon sincerity, to be upon the example of the Sahaba and the Salaf. Look at Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Stabbed. When he was leading the Fajr prayer. He was leading the Fajr prayer and he was stabbed. Blood was pouring out of him. That's what it mentions in the narrations. Blood was pouring out of him. And then he carried on the Fajr prayer. Even with that blood coming out with the stab wound from that kafir who tried to kill him. Blood was pouring out and he carried on and finished the Fajr prayer. The next day he was still injured from the stab wounds and the blood was still coming out. And one of the Sahaba went to wake him up for the Fajr prayer. And Sir Umar ibn Khattab, he said, even with that wound the way it was, with the blood coming out of it, stab wounds, he said, certainly there is no share in Islam for the one who abandons the prayer. And he got up and he prayed with that. This was their level of worship. This was their level of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is who you want to emulate. This is what you want to strive for. So do not allow the society to drag you down. Do not allow the affairs of the world to drag you down. This world is only temporary. It will come to an end. You have no permanent residency here at all. Be in this world as you are passing through it. And focus on the worship as the Sahaba and the Salaf did. So we'll conclude upon that point today. We'll round it off there until tomorrow, inshaAllah ta'ala. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Any questions or anything anybody wants to add? Otherwise we'll round it off there. Huh? What do you say? Interesting, huh? All of the prayers, when you are in the sujood, then it is sunnah, it is legislated for you to make dua in your prostration. Or nafal, whatever, supererogatory, obligatory. Make the dua in your prostration. And even if you have to make it in English, a particular dua is allowed. Don't go and memorize the du'as in Arabic. There are many different types of dua in Arabic. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً, etc. Try to memorize those, and if you have something specific, it's allowed to make it in your language. The night before Fajr. Yeah, you know, this issue about the number of Taraweeh. How many Taraweeh did you pray? How many raka'at did you pray for the night prayer? There is a famous as well. The Prophet ﷺ, what is the maximum he ever used to pray in the night prayer? 11, and in one narration it says 13. 11 or 13. So some of the scholars hold the opinion you should not go over that number. You should not go over 11 or 13. But there are many scholars who say it is not a prohibition. You are allowed to do more. Shaykh al-Fawzan holds that opinion. Many other scholars hold that opinion too. So even though what is mentioned by many scholars, and perhaps closer to us, is to stick to the number of 13, there are many scholars, you should be aware, that don't stick to that, and they say it is allowed to pray more like this. If a person did do that, it is not something you can tell them off with. It isn't. Many scholars hold the opinion you can't pray more. Like Shaykh al-Fawzan, pray 20, pray 25, pray 30. You can pray more. Some scholars hold that opinion. So if somebody did that, you can't rebuke them for it. You can't tell them that you're making a mistake, it's only 13. It is possible to do more. Some scholars have that opinion. But many scholars only have the opinion of 13. So you have those two issues there. If somebody looked into it and decided it's okay to pray more, then so be it. A person can pray more. They can stand in the last third of the night again. They can pray some more raka'at. It is something the scholars have mentioned. Even Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned something similar. The Salaf. The Salaf. In Arabic, the word Salaf means somebody who's come by before you. As-Salaf al-Salih, they are the first three generations. From the Prophet ﷺ, his generation. Then the next generation. Then the next generation. How do we know that? Because there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, خير الناس القرن الذي بعثت فيهم ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. The best of the people are this generation that I've been sent. Who were they? Companions, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhu and others. Then he said, ثم الذين يلونهم. Then the generation that come after them. ثم الذين يلونهم. Then the generation that come after them. So the Sahaba, then the next, then the next. Those three generations are the ones the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the Hadith, in the Sunnah. And they are the righteous generation, as-Salaf al-Salih. So when we talk about being Salafi, or being upon the way of the Salaf, what we're saying is, we're trying to be like those early generations. How they practiced Islam directly from the Prophet ﷺ. The likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn Khattab, the example we mentioned now, they are the Salaf. They are the people you're trying to be like. Not people who came after them, not the Imam in your masjid, no, not this person, that person. They're trying to be upon the way of the Salaf. They are the Salaf, those early generations. adhan and the iqamah? How should you? Alright, so between the adhan and the iqamah, it is sunnah mentioned in the hadith. You can pray 2 raka'at, for example. Between every adhan and iqamah, it is sunnah you can pray 2 raka'at. So instead of sitting there, stand after the adhan finishes, pray 2 raka'at. That is mentioned in the sunnah. Shaykh Zayd al-Madkhali rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned this point as well. Every time the adhan occurs, before the iqamah happens, you should leave a couple of minutes. So that anybody who wants to get up and implement that sunnah and pray 2 raka'at gets the opportunity to pray. So you can do that. Alternatively, you can sit and make dua, for example. A person could sit there during that time, couple of minutes before the iqamah, making dua, especially before Maghrib. A time to make that dua before opening your fast. So dua and prayer, these are the types of things you do during that time. Conversation and chatting and talking isn't people. Those times, it's a time of worship. The adhan has gone. The iqamah is coming. Leave the conversation now till after the prayer. Busy yourself with the Quran, with dua, with prayer. Al-Imam Muhammad Ibn Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was a scholar from 200 or 300 years ago. And this particular scholar, he was from around about the Saudi Arabia area. Of course, Saudi Arabia didn't exist initially, but then after that time it developed. But in that Arabian Peninsula, 200 or 300 years ago, what was happening in that area where Saudi Arabia is now? 200 or 300 years ago, what was happening in that area? Here. The Arabs in that area 200 or 300 years ago were upon shirk. They used to have shrines and tombs, graveyards going and prostrating and tawaf and everything. This Imam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab was born at that time. And he saw what the people were up to. All the shirk going around doing tawaf and making dua to the dead. He studied and learned as he grew up, and he realized this isn't the way of Islam. He studied books, he learned. And he realized from the hadith and the Quran that this isn't the way of Islam. This is shirk what they're doing. So he wrote lots of books to clarify this to the people, to bring them back to the truth. He wrote the famous book Kitab al-Tawheed, the book of Tawheed, to explain to them you don't go to the graves and prostrate to them. You don't go to the graves and make dua to them. Wrote the book like Kitab al-Tawheed, wrote the book Kashf al-Shubuhat, the removal of the doubt. Wrote the book, the 6 fundamental principles, the 4 fundamental principles, the 6 events from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Many books clarifying Tawheed to people. In reality, therefore, he was clarifying the way of the Salaf. He wasn't a deviant at all. People call him a deviant, but which ones? The ones who are worshipping the graves. They said, you're a deviant. Why are you telling us to stop worshipping the graves? Why do you want us to knock down these shrines? They are the ones who started calling him a deviant. But who is the deviant in reality? The ones who are going around the graves and making dua to him? Or him? The ones making the dua to the graves are the deviants. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he was calling to the way of the Salaf. He was explaining to them, you cannot do these things, it's shirk. The Tawheed is the way of the Salaf, the way of the Prophet ﷺ, the way of the Quran. He was a righteous man. It is all propaganda what we hear from the Sufis and their people, because they are upon the way of going to the graves of intercession, of going to the Prophet's grave and making dua to him. And remind me tomorrow, I'll tell you some stories about that. About when they go to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and they make dua to him and what they do. So that is deviance from them. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab was a righteous man. He called for the way of the Salaf. We leave it there then. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll carry on tomorrow. We'll round it off with this last comment. You what? Yeah. Second line, it would be appropriate perhaps to begin towards the center and branch out. It would be appropriate, because then everything is in line. Begin near the center and work out. So you come in, no problem. They can come on the back and join this side, join that side, join this side, join that side. So maybe begin from behind the Imam where he is, and start branching out either side from there. Also this first row we've noticed a lot now. The last couple of days, people are scared of the walls. Scared of the wall down there and scared of the wall here, because you know when you go into ruku' or prostration, you're going to end up with a bump here. So these lines, the first line, you got to make the first person here with enough space to prostrate. Then work down and the last person with enough space to prostrate. And not to bend away. It bends away at the edges so people make space to prostrate. That's okay, it's not one person less. Make it one person less so the line can be straight. Make sure it's the heels at the back. You got to look from behind to see if the line is straight. Not from the front of the shoulder. From behind, as Shaykh Uthaymeen he mentioned. Shaykh Uthaymeen said, look at the heels from behind, everybody is lined up. If you can't see at the end of the line people's heels, that means they've gone in. If you come back out again so you can see their heels. Or if you're looking down and you can see them bending outwards, you can see all their body from the side, they've gone outwards. So you need to look to see everybody's heels, you can see the edges at the back. So that it's straight all the way. It is from the sunnah to straighten the rows. The Prophet ﷺ used to go and check them. The Sahaba used to appoint people. Here, alhamdulillah, it's small. But in places where you have 20 rows, 30 rows, not possible for the Imam to go through every row. So it's mentioned about Uthman radiallahu anhu. He used to appoint somebody. From down there, one of the people go and check the rows at the back. And he would check the rows at the front. And that person would come back and say, okay, I've straightened them. So then he would begin the prayer. He wouldn't begin the prayer until the rows were straightened. From the sunnah to do that. You can leave it there, it's going to get very late. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll carry on tomorrow. Jazakumullahu khair. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.